Well, it's 12 noon on my clock. And the Iowa State University Extension Dairy Team welcomes everybody to this program. We'll be hosting this farm transition webinar today. It complements the farm transition program that will be held in Lyon County on December 11th and 18th. Just to let you know, you can register for the live series by going to goiastate.edu/farm 2025 or call Carly Hiram at the Lyon County Extension Office at 712-472-2576. This program will be presented by Tim Christensen with a focus on beginning the process of farm transitions. Tim is a farm management specialist for Iowa State University Extension and Outreach in Southwest Iowa. For the last 8 years, Tim has worked educating Iowa farmers in areas of farm succession, grain and livestock marketing, farm bill, cost of production, and many other subjects. Tim also has been a leader in development and delivery of farm stress and mental health awareness in the agriculture community. Before coming to Iowa State, Tim worked in a range of management roles in agriculture industry, and he has a BS in animal science from Northwest Missouri State University. Today, Tim will focus on the steps of creating a farm succession plan and a state transition plan. Attendees will have a better understanding of how and whys of this process and where to go to find the resources and information to make the right plan for their family. As I always say, Tim, the podium is yours.
Thank you, Fred, and thanks for having me, and thanks everybody for joining. My contact information is up there, and I'll have it again at the end. But I always like to start these by telling you that we have an hour together. Typically, I do this over a 6-hour program, 2 nights, 6 hours. This is a huge subject and lots of things to go into. We're obviously not going to get to all those today, but hopefully we can give you some things to think about, and at the end I'll give you some opportunities to learn more if we've piqued your interest. Also, if I get my computer to move forward here, there we go. I always have to point out that I am not a lawyer. I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm here to provide you non-biased background information and seek your own legal counsel. I'm also not a CPA, so I'm not here to give you financial advice or legal advice, but just good information and resources to be able to educate yourself. So when we talk about estate planning or transition planning or succession planning, I'm guilty, as most people, of really mixing these terms together. There are differences in those terms. With estate planning is really just the transferring of the assets, and I like to say maybe the easiest part of this process, because there's not any emotion in it. It's just the transfer of the assets, whether it be equipment, livestock, land, just really talking about those physical, tangible things. With transition planning, we're talking more about transitioning the business from one generation to the other, the management of the business, who's making those day-to-day decisions, and how are those decisions being made. And with succession planning, we're putting those two things together and making sure they're working together. So, like I said, I'm guilty. I interchange these terms pretty regularly, whether I'm using them correctly or not. But those are the true definitions of those, if that matters to you. So today we're going to talk about some goal setting, really that importance of the business succession planning. Why is it so important that we have one, and make sure we have one that works for us? That farm succession structure. We're going to talk about working with an attorney, some language, some tax implications on your estate planning. So this is one of my favorite things I always use when I start these programs. A little cartoon here, 2 people in a canoe, and the one guy says, "Is that drain thing following us?" And really this is the the puts together in my mind in a picture of everything that we're trying to avoid when we talk about estate and transition planning is we're really trying to get everybody pointed the same way in the canoe and make sure we're moving the business forward as opposed to fighting each other and rowing in different directions. So when we talk about estate planning or transition planning, we really need to talk about who should be involved. And when we have those conversations, there's a long list of people, the parents, anybody that owns any assets, any business partners you might have, any heirs that are working in the business or not working in the business, any other non-family business partners, and even the daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws. And I work with a lot of families, and we're going to talk a little more about a family meeting and the importance of a family meeting. I get asked a lot on whether the daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws should be in that room. And my answer is always yes. I want them in the room. I want them to hear firsthand what's going on and not your son or daughter's version of what they heard when they get home and tell them. I just soon have them there to hear it themselves. So that's the list we think of, but there's a lot of other people that I think that need to be involved in that we don't always think about. We need an attorney that's knowledgeable in estate planning. They really need to be on our team and involved in the decisions we're making. Our financial advisors, our insurance advisors, any management consultants, lenders, or mediators we might be working for. And it goes back to that canoe. I can't expect my financial advisor to give me good financial advice if I don't have them involved in the plan and let them know what's going on and where I'm trying to take things. Or the same way with insurance, attorneys, all those people need to know my plan. They need to be involved in the plan. If I'm expecting them to give me good advice, and I'm going to depend on their advice, I need to make sure they're involved in that decision-making process as well. And probably the most important thing to me when I talk about this farm succession stuff is communication. It's just the real critical factor of seeing success of these farm businesses. When I work with families that are struggling, 99 times out of 100, the reason they're struggling is a communication factor. And that's really important. And there's a really good quote that I found along the way. It said, a family business cannot be understood without understanding the family that created it. And that includes how the family members communicate with each other. So that really defines, that communication really defines what that family business is. So when we're talking about that business transfer process, we have the older generation. We have to transfer the ownership of the property. We got to figure out how to transfer the management to the younger generation and figure out how we're going to divide that income as we go along. So that's kind of just a little diagram of how this process kind of looks and the stages that we go through. We have to try some things out and test some things and see if somebody is capable of making decisions and maybe giving them some small decisions to make. And once we get comfortable with that, we make the commitment to stand behind their decisions, and then we've established that, and then the older generation can start backing out of that process. So another good graph I found along the way that I really like is just the business cycle. When we look at a generation of business cycle, we usually come in, there's lots of growth. At some point that business typically matures, and as we get into our older years, a lot of times we see that start to decline as our health and ability to be out doing the work every day starts to decline. So kind of just a typical what a business life cycle looks like for one generation. Where it gets complicated is when we put in the second generation. And what complicates it is a lot of things that I like to look at in this graph that I think make a lot of sense. And where we start that introduction, I think, is really important. If we start that introduction at the right place as the business is growing, you can see that ultimately that business grows beyond what it would have with one generation when we bring in the next generation. So that's really important. And that little dip there during introduction, there's always a rough time where that new generation might struggle, maybe see a little dip before they really get into their growth, and making sure we time that out while the first generation is still in their growth cycle is really important, and not breaking this chain I think helps assure that the business is going to continue to grow and be prosperous in the future. So, before I go on, I just want to say you all have your chat box. Hopefully you found it on your screen. You feel free to click on that chat box. I'm trying to monitor if Fred's watching it for me too. If you have any questions as I go through this or comments, I normally do this in person, so doing it to a screen is kind of tough. I can't see your facial expressions or if anybody's asleep in the back row. So feel free to stop me and ask questions along the way if something comes up. So when we talk about that next generation and trying to keep the farm and the family, there's a lot of things that can happen, and this is just an example to kind of walk through what we see a lot of times. Is we have grandpa and grandma have 640 acres. They have 4 kids, and they want to be fair. They want to be equal, so they give each kid 25% of that farm, usually in an undivided interest situation where they all own 25% of the whole farm, but none of them really own anything. Seems fairly simple. We can say that all 4 kids get along and they're all happy. If we want to pretend that way, that's fine. But then we move into the next generation. If Alan has 4 kids and he leaves them an equal share, now they each own 6.25%. Bill has 5 kids, so they own 5%. Kathy has 3 kids, so they own 8.3%. So you can see already that we've built, by trying to be fair and equal and just leaving everything share and share alike, we've already built in some inequity between those grandkids having different ownership levels. And then sometimes we run into a situation like Donna where she doesn't have any kids and she wants to leave her 25% to the church, and the church wants to sell. Right? So obviously there's some issues there. I think they're pretty easy to see where that strategy of just leaving everything in equal shares to everybody can be a disaster as it moves forward. So what happens in that situation? Somebody wants out. Well, then we end up if we can't get along, we end up in a partition. And in partitions, when we can't get along, the court comes in. The judge will try to help determine, is there a way to split the farm equally to get that person out? They try to preserve the farm if they can, but some farms that just doesn't work, and some families that just doesn't work. And ultimately, if that doesn't work, the judge could order a sale of the property on an open market or an auction. And it's important to know that any owner can bring a partition act at any time. So we go back to my example. Even those grandchildren with a 5% ownership could ultimately force a partition action. So another thing I think it's important to talk about is who should have an estate plan, and it's everybody. It doesn't matter how much you have. You say, I just have a small farm or just a house and a car. Whatever you have, if you have anything, you need an estate plan. And I love those commercials, if you've seen them on TV, where the guy and his son are working on the car in the garage, and he says, "Son, I want you to have this car." And the guy pops up and says, "Doesn't count, right?" If it's not documented and done properly, it's not enforceable. So it doesn't matter what your wishes are, unless we put together a plan and have a documented plan. Those wishes do not matter. It's not just about money. It's about those other things as well. And if you say, "Well, gee, I don't think I need a plan. I don't want to do a plan. I don't want to go through that. It's too hurtful. It's too hard to think about. I've heard all those comments." That's fine. By doing nothing, you still have a plan. Because if you don't have a plan, the state of Iowa has a plan for you. They come in, your estate will go into intestacy, and there's an Iowa code where they have a plan and how they will work through what to do that. So it's really important you have a plan, and I don't like to be the doom and gloom guy, but you need to have a plan today. None of us are promised tomorrow. We don't have to watch the news for very long to see that there's a lot of people that lose their life unexpectedly in car accidents and other freak accidents along the way. None of us are invincible. So we all need a plan, and we all need a plan today. Once we get together that plan, I think it's really, really important we start communicating that plan. You know, does the next generation want to farm? Have you really asked that question? I've ran into a lot of cases where I've had a family member that says, "Oh, my son or daughter's moved away. They have a good life somewhere else. They have no interest in the farm." We sat down and talked to that son or daughter, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I can't wait to come home and farm. I haven't wanted to be a burden on the farm, so I went off and made my own life. But I really want to come home and farm as my ultimate goals." Well, if we don't communicate that, it's hard to make that plan. We really need to know if we can all get along and what is it going to take for us all to get along. It's an important part of this process. And is there enough income to support multiple families? I have this conversation with a lot of families where they're trying to bring a child into the operation. If we don't grow that operation, you know, we're coming up on Thanksgiving. If we have a pumpkin pie and there's 4 of us, we each get a quarter of the pie and everybody's happy. We all invite a friend over and everybody's piece of pie gets smaller. And at what point does that piece of pie become so small that people aren't interested in it or it's not able to support that meal? That's kind of what we're talking about here. If we're bringing somebody else into the family, how do we increase that income to be able to support those extra family members? And do we have the same goals and vision for the farm as the next generation? And having that discussed ahead of time and what those goals and visions are, to me, is a really, really important part of this process. Making sure that we're all on the same page. And back to my canoe at the beginning, make sure we're all pointed the same way in the canoe and rowing together and not against each other. So when we talk about coordinating that plan, there's several kind of 3 main branches of it to me. And part of it is retirement planning. If a generation is stepping away, we're bringing in another generation. What's the plan for the older generation to step away? What's the financial plan for them? How do we build that into this income, into our planning to make sure that they can live out the rest of their life in a manner that they feel that they're comfortable? Then there's the estate planning, really transferring those assets, getting those moved out of your name into the next generation's name or whatever, a corporation or an LLC or whatever tool we're going to use. Actually taking the steps of doing that. And then there's the income tax planning. What is the implications of that? And we're going to talk a little bit about estate taxes and inheritance tax and stuff at the end of this program. But probably the biggest concern I have when we talk about taxes is really capital gains tax. We have all that equipment and livestock, those assets sitting around that if we start selling off those assets, there's probably depreciated out, and we probably have a capital gains issue if we're not careful in how we plan out doing that and making sure we have a good plan on doing that. And the same thing goes for this next generation. I talked to a lot of that next generation, and I'm like, hey, just because Dad had a tractor for every piece of equipment and didn't pull a hitch pin doesn't mean you're going to be able to do that. So don't let the parents give you something you don't want, because a lot of times when we give you something we don't want, we really have just given you a capital gains tax problem. More than a positive thing, it can turn into a negative thing really easily. So you got to be careful not to make the first generation's capital gains tax problem the next generation's problem, or at least account for it if we do. So really, where I'm getting to here is understanding all that. Really, developing goals is probably a really good first step. And I always tell people I believe, and I stole this from a colleague of mine, Calvin Leibold. I always say I believe in the golden rule, and that's whoever has the gold rules, right? It's your blood, sweat, and tears that you've built into building this business. It's your right to do with it what you wish. You don't owe anybody anything. You're in the driver's seat. So we really need to talk to you and understand, what do you want the future to look like? How do you want this plan to go? What are your goals through this plan? But probably even before we get too deep into that, probably the first the first thing we need to do is really sit down and figure out what you have. Is there assets there to give away? Are they paid for? Is there mortgages? Is it a successful business? Is it a prosperous business? Is there a chance for the business to be prosperous in the future? And what does that look like? What do those balance sheets look like? What is the inventory? What's the current status of the business or the farm that we're looking at giving away? And what is our goals moving forward? And really, what are our goals under various circumstances? And this is the hard part that nobody wants to think about. I'm married and have a couple children, so when I do my plan, I need to think about what happens if my spouse dies before me. When I build that plan, I always think about me passing first. She's probably a lot better, takes a lot better care of herself than I do, so I always figure that I'm going to go first, but who knows, right? What happens if she goes first? I need to make sure when I'm building this plan, I have flexibility into it and understanding of what happens if that happens. Who's going to receive the income? Is she just going to sell off what we have at the farm? Is she going to try to continue to farm? Is one of my children going to come in at that point? Who's going to be taking over the management of those situations? Lots of questions that happen, and you have to think about it both ways. And it even gets more scary than that. What happens if something happens to both of us? We travel together, we do lots of things together. There's nothing to say that something couldn't happen to us both at the same time. And what does that do to our plan? And we really need to talk through that and think through our plan as we move through it, and with that scenario in mind. And even to get more morbid, what if my whole family passes? Then what happens? Does it go beyond that? Where do we go with that? And we really need to run all those scenarios. It's not fun to think about. It's not fun to talk about, but it's really important part of this process that we need to discuss. So another big question I have when we're doing this is what is the transition plan for? Or who is it for, right? Is it to pass a business on to the next generation? Are we planning for retirement? Are we trying to jumpstart some kids' ambitions? Do we already have a kid that's in the business and we want to see them continue? Are we just trying to avoid taxes? Is that our number one goal? What is your most important goal? And that's really going to steer where we go. And we're not going to get into it today because of the time constraints, but there's all kinds of tools, whether it's trust and revocable trust and living trust and irrevocable trusts and LLCs and S corps and C corps and a will and probate. There's all kinds of things out there that we can talk about and tools and vehicles that we can use to build your plan. But until we really understand what your goals are and who you're doing it for, it's really hard to decide which of those tools are best for you. None of those tools work for everybody. It's kind of like the toolbox when you're working on the tractor. You don't use every tool in the toolbox every time you work on the tractor, but the more tools you can have in your toolbox, the better you are when you get to start working on it. So some common estate planning goals when I work with families, it's one I always hear first all the time is we don't want to pay any taxes at death. Everybody's scared to death to pay taxes, and hopefully by the end of this program, you'll have a little better understanding why that should not be your number one goal. Another one I hear a lot is I don't want to pay probate. I need a trust because I don't want to pay probate. Well, probate's not always a bad thing. It costs money to put together a trust. There's lots of pros and cons to both probates and trusts, and you need to really understand how both of those work and the timeline on both of those when you make your decision to go which direction you want to go. I want to conserve my property during life and death in accordance with an estate planning goals. That's really you're trying to hold together the family farm. That's what I hear a lot of goals. I want to hold that family farm together. I want to see it continue to be in the family. I want to continue to see it prosperous. And that's our goal a lot of times when we work this. and providing financial security for yourself as you retire or parents as they retire. Sometimes we have family members with disabilities. Sometimes we're wanting to set up to make sure grandchildren or great-grandchildren are prosperous sometimes. So understanding those goals and having a good set of goals is a great place to start. Understanding what you have and the value of what you have, and then what your goals and how you want to move forward are probably two of the most important first steps as we start thinking about doing this. If you're starting from square one, that's where I would point you. So some just friendly reminders I like to talk about is, don't assume you'll have enough time or feel well enough to complete this. Your bucket list, none of us are promised tomorrow. We're all just a doctor visit away from having some severe health issues, a car wreck away from being incapacitated or even killed. We don't have forever, so we really need to move forward. You really need to think about what knowledge you have that you haven't transferred. What does that next generation need to know if you're not here tomorrow? And I see this a lot during land leasing. I get a lot of calls every fall saying, hey, I lost my husband, I lost my wife, I lost my dad, I lost somebody. They always figured out and negotiated all the cash rents for the next year. I don't even know where to start. Where do I start? And I just always think that's a shame that we aren't transferring that knowledge. We can talk about transferring equipment and we do all that on paper, but really that transferring that knowledge is just as important. And don't leave the decision making to the surviving spouse or the next generation. It's always a disaster when we get involved when there isn't a plan. When there's a loss, especially an unexpected loss in a family, emotions are high. Everybody's feelings are on max overload. It's not the time that people need to make decisions. The more decisions and the easier you can make that process while you're alive. If something happens to you, we'll be doing would be a great gift to the surviving spouse or the next generation, having all that stuff taken care of so that they don't have to worry about it while they're also trying to make funeral plans and all the other things that go along with that. So, and I think it's really important to communicate and be open about your wishes. Like I said, I've had lots of situations where there's a lot of hurt feelings and a lot of people upset, and it just comes down to communication. If you're the younger generation, you need to make it known that you are wanting to come home and farm and be part of that communication. Or you maybe don't want to come home and farm. Whatever it is, everybody needs to be open and honest about their feelings and their wishes and share those with everybody. And I know that sounds like unicorns and rainbows, and it's a lot easier to say than it is to do, but it's really the ultimate goal is to be open about everything, that as open as you possibly can be. Like I said, there's no time like today to start. None of us are promised tomorrow. I think it's really important that we all have a plan and we all get started right away. Talk to your kids and your spouse. Understand their goals and ambitions. Get everybody pointed in the same direction in that canoe, and make sure you're all rowing in the same position. And I see this a lot, and it's a really stubborn attitude that I see a lot, that I really try to throw water on as quickly as I can, but I got a lot of people. It's my farm right now. It's my problem. I don't want to talk to my kids and my spouse about what's going on. Maybe there's some financial issues or some other issues going on the farm that you're embarrassed or your pride doesn't want to or doesn't allow you to or whatever to talk about those things. It's really important. I get a lot of younger generations that are upset with their parents because they think they have millions and millions of dollars that they're just holding back, when in reality maybe the farm is actually struggling and in financial trouble. And if we don't talk about it, there's a lot of misconceptions that come along. So, do I have advice on how to begin a conversation with children when the relationship between older and younger is contentious? Yeah, I think the advice I have for that is I'm not a psychologist, and so take my advice for what it's worth. But I'd like to just schedule a time and tell everybody, hey, I would like to talk about this. I'd like to find a neutral location to do it. Maybe not at the family dining table where we've all had supper together and everybody kind of has their own power structure there. You know, Dad always sits at the head of the table every time we have supper, so maybe that's not the best place to have that meeting. Let people know that you're going to wanting to have this meeting. Set a time and a place that's mutual, and just lay your cards on the table and be open and honest, and try to keep the emotion. And this is the silliest thing I'll probably say this whole meeting, but try to keep as much emotion out of it as you can, and lay the facts on the table, and hopefully you can have your other people in the meeting follow your lead and try to do the same thing. So I'm big on having a list of rules when we go into those meetings, like, hey, we're going to be respectful, we're not going to talk over each other, whatever that might be that you think is a concern. Have everybody sign a set of rules before you do that, so everybody knows your expectations coming in. So one thing we deal with a lot, I hear a lot when we talk about this, and we talk about multiple kids in an operation. You know, we have on-farm versus off-farm errors, and should we be equal? Should we be fair? How do you be fair? How do you be equal? We hear that a lot, and I always like to say, I don't give two darns about being equal. I do believe being fair is important, and why I say that is I found another little cartoon right here that explains why. The first picture is equal. They all have the same boost, right? But that doesn't mean it's fair to the poor little guy there in the purple, right? If we're fair, which is more the picture on the right, we can try to get everybody to the same level. And so that's kind of my fair versus equal. We go into lots of strategies when we do our programs. We go into lots of strategies where we can use other assets, life insurance, retirement accounts, other savings accounts. We can use to try to level that out, as opposed to just trying to be equal and give a little bit to everybody. We can try to work through that, and we work through some of that in our other workshops that we have more time. So once we kind of get those goals put together, we can start developing those action plans and how we're going to move forward. So, you know, probably the next hardest thing in my mind is, like I said, the assets are in my mind equal or easy. We can work through those assets pretty easily and build the tools to transfer those assets. But the management's probably the biggest hiccup that I see in a lot of families that I work with. Trying to make that gradual shift in management from one generation, shifting those assets and ownership from one generation to the other, and trying to determine any disruptions, and trying to look ahead and see what events that could be a problem and try to avoid as many of those as we can. So another great quote that I found along the way is the final test of greatness in a CEO is how well he chooses a successor and whether he can step aside and let the successor run the company. And it's the last part of that sentence that really hits home to me, because I have a lot of families, and I always say about my dad included, you know, my dad was really excited that I went off to college and got educated and got to the point where I was able to make my own decisions, as long as they were the same decisions he would make. You know, he really was really had his thought process, and anybody that didn't do what he thought they should do was just not as intelligent as he thought they should be, and he was really strong that way, and it made it really hard. So we got to look back, and I work with a lot of families that are struggling with this and trying to pass that over, and whether they're making the right decisions or not. And I always encourage that older generation to think back of when they started, and if they made any mistakes, and how they worked through that mistakes, and how they learned what they know now. And a lot of times we do learn through some of those mistakes. So being able to step aside and let the successor run the company is one of the hardest things we do in farming. And it's something that is really key to the success of this as we're passing on to the next generation. And part of that's building that management team, you know, designing it as a team approach, developing developing those management skills, cross training, making sure everybody knows what decisions are being made. Find a effective system for routine communication. Is there a text group if you're tech savvy? Is there a family meeting or a business meeting once a week or once a month to talk about what's going on the farm and how you're moving forward? And make sure you're evaluating that process in a non-threatening way. I really like to sit down with families, and there's an ag decision maker file. I don't remember the file off the top of my head, but Anne's on here. She might point it up before I'm done. It's in Ag Decision Maker that talks about transferring that management, and there's a checklist there or an area where both generations can fill out each task that happens on the farm and at what point we're going to transfer that, and make sure we communicate that. If it's buying feed or corn seed or whatever it is, who's making that decision today, who's making it in 5 years, who's making it in 10 years, and really having a plan on who's making those decisions when, so that everybody's on the same page and knows who's making those decisions can save a lot of problems. And when we're turning over that control, we really we need to start early, make sure we have plenty of time to learn each potential successor's capacity, understand their strengths and their weaknesses, understanding who all's involved, whether it's in-laws, grandchildren, neighbors. What are their strengths and how do we play into those? What are their weaknesses and how do we build systems in place that help to protect them from their weaknesses? And you really got to ask yourself, as that older generation, can you live with their decisions? Some of those decisions get pretty deep. Whether it's Ford versus Chevy or John Deere versus International, what can you live with and what can't you live with, and making sure you're letting them make decisions that you can live with their decisions. You don't have to give them all the control. You don't have to hand them to the reins all at once. We can start taking bits and pieces and let them master those bits and pieces before we give them another one, and really transition that over time. Rome wasn't built in a day. Transferring that control hopefully doesn't happen in a day. That's what we're trying to prevent. So start doing it gradually now, but make sure it is moving forward. Don't let it get stagnant, because, like as I said earlier, we aren't always promised tomorrow. So, addressing those power issues, who controls the decision making, making sure that we're making those decisions what is best for the business, not what's best for us. Sometimes it's something hard to separate, but we really need to be thinking about that. And what happens, who's making those decisions under alternate scenarios? What happens if I go to Hawaii for 2 weeks, right? Do I want them to call me back every time that somebody trips a breaker in the machine shed or whatever the case may be made? What decisions can be made while I'm not there? What decisions have to involve me? Really having those conversations is important. And, we talked a little bit about fair and equal, but as people are making those decisions, making sure we're compensating them for those decisions and those labor contributions, capital contributions, keeping track of those, talking about those ahead of time. What's the value of those? And, working that into the equation as we move forward. A lot of times we have a 40, 50-year-old child that's been working on their farm the entire life and, never got a paycheck and never had anything transferred to them. They've just kind of been a hired man that's had their house and their bills paid for. It's really hard to go back and look at what the value of that 20 plus years of labor and being there every day is worth. So making sure we understand that and account for it is important. So yeah, we can value that ownership interest, make sure we're working through that and continue to look at that process as we go throughout time. So I know I'm going fast. Yeah, I figured Ann would be on top of that. Sorry, I was just looking at the chat. So just wanted to touch base because, as I said earlier, a lot of families I work with, they say, well, I don't want to pay any estate taxes. Well, the reality is nobody really pays estate taxes, and I'll kind of talk to you why. But in 2013, 0.014% of estates paid estate taxes, and that's not just farm, that's everything. So it's a really, really small percent. We had the big, beautiful bill passed this summer. It kept that lifetime exemption for 2025 at 13.99 million dollars. In 2026, so as of January 1st, we go to $15 million per person of an exemption. And starting in 2027, it'll be adjusted for inflation after that. So that's per individual. So what this says, and it also made it permanent. So that was good. In the past, it was always sunsetted. Well, what this means is if you're married, as of December 1st, you have $30 million of exemption. So if your estate is worth less than $30 million, you have zero estate tax issues. And it's a estate and gift tax. So it's an accumulation of what you give away or your estate is worth when you pass away. And with a person is 15 million, with you have a spouse, you have 30 million. With land values today, there's probably a lot of farms closer to that than what they want to admit in assets. But when you look at that total estate, if you're under that 30 million, if you're married and under that 30 million, you have zero things to worry about when it comes to that. And if you go over that 15 million, then there's some pretty severe tax implications, which is 40%. So if you're in that case where you think you're getting close to over 15 million as an individual, as 30 million as a couple, you probably need to be talking to your accountant and figuring out a plan on how you're going to handle that, because there's some ways around that, but I'll let them discuss that with you. So just to kind of show you over time where that's been, it's definitely a lot better than it was back in 2000, 2001. It was only $675,000 per person. So very advantageous to farmers and passing on that stuff to get you out of estate tax. So hopefully that can ease your concerns a little bit about estate tax or death tax, whatever you want to call it. As I said earlier, you get that portability. So if you're married, you get your spouse dies, you still get their exclusion. So that goes with you if you're married. So it keeps you at that 30 million if they happen to pass. You just need to make sure you fill out the forms and work with your legal team to get that done within 9 months after their death. There's also, is another tool that we use in taxes is a gift tax. You have an annual exclusion of $19,000 per person. You can give assets back and forth to a spouse or charitable deduction at any time. If you go over the 19 million, that's fine too. You just have to fill it out on that 706 form, and it comes out, or 19,000. Sorry, you got to fill out that 706 form, and it goes against your 15 million. So there's still no taxes. It just starts eroding away at that 15 million. And examples of gifts could be selling something at below market rate, or renting them a farm at a below market rate, giving them a severe discounts on things, or examples of gifts besides just flat giving them something. So why this is important, 19,000 doesn't seem like a lot, but if we take grandpa and grandma, they have 2 kids, they can give away $190,000 a year in this situation by giving the mom and dad and the 3 kids, all of them 19,000. They can shed $190,000 worth of assets a year and not have to even file anything. The IRS doesn't even want to know about it as long as you're under the 19,000. So it's a good way to slowly transfer some assets over time and avoid any tax implications. So Iowa had an inheritance tax, and that's what it's like, but it's not really important because it's gone. Effective as of January 1st last year, Iowa has no inheritance tax. So if you say your number one goal is avoiding estate taxes, if you're not over 30 million, worth over 30 million, and you're in the state of Iowa, it should not be your number one concern. You're probably not going to have any issues as long as you're working with a good accountant. So we're getting close to the end here. Like I said, went through a lot of things really fast. Trying to give you a taste for some stuff, but the exciting thing is there's a lot of meetings coming up around the state. You can see they're starting on December 1st. I know I didn't see where everybody was from, so I just put all of these in here because I didn't know where everybody'd be from. Some are in your area, some aren't. Contact your local extension office if you're interested, but the real important one there is in the middle. It's important to me anyway. Sorry, it's in Sioux Center, and that's not correct. The second to bottom one is the important one. In Rock Rapids, Fred and I are going to be there on the 11th and 18th during the day, doing that 6-hour program. But there's lots of other programs around the state as well, as you can see as you go through there. So, and Fred, I saw put some stuff in there, advertising through that. So I'm really excited about this farm and the state and the succession planning portal that the Center for Ag and Law and Taxation have put together. It's a portal that we built. It's full of resources. There's over 14 hours of videos, downloadable workbook, case studies, communication tools, all kinds of good stuff. If you're thinking about going through this process, there's a $75 one-time fee to access this portal. But I'd like to tell people, if you get organized before you go talk to your lawyer, less than 15 minutes with your lawyer, if you can save less than 15 minutes with your lawyer, because you're better educated going into it, you're definitely going to get your return on investment on this $75 thing. There's a ton of experts. Kylie Fleming's on there talking about the family communication stuff. The farm management team's all involved. The attorneys at the Center for Ag and Law and Taxation are involved. You can learn at your own pace at home and make sure when you meet with those advisors, you're educated and know what you're doing. As part of those workshops I showed you earlier, you will get access to this portal. When you sign up for the workshops, you'll get access to this portal as well. So hopefully you can join us at one of those, and you can save yourself the $75. The workshops will cost you some money, but we'll give you free access to the portal if you come to the workshop, and a book. So some other resources that you should be aware of is the Ag Decision Maker, which is a library of resources that the farm management team has put together. Tons and tons of information there on farm succession and transferring assets and succession and estate planning. The Center for Ag and Law and Taxation's website's right there, another great place for resources. There's Farm Financial Associates. If you need any help getting organized financially with balance sheets and understanding where you are, there's a free resource there that we can help you with. There's the Beginning Farmer Center. If you got some beginning farmers or you don't have somebody to transfer to, we can help you through that. There's our farm management team that I'm part of. There's 6 of us around the state besides myself. There's your own legal counsel and your own tax preparers that can help you with that too. And lastly, before we get into the questions, I always like to bring up the farm stress thing. It's real. This is a stressful process. Farming is a stressful occupation. I just like to remind everybody, at the very least, remember that there's the Iowa Concerns hotline out there. It's been around since 1985. It's available 24/7. It's free. It's confidential. There's people there to help you all kinds of concerns, whether it's financial, legal, stress-related. We really see a lot of times people get stressed out. They might look at using some drugs or alcohol to deal with it. They get themselves in some family issues. Maybe get into some legal issues along the way, and it can really snowball. I really encourage that if you know somebody or you yourself needs to talk to somebody, to pick up the phone and call these people. They're in Iowa. They can get you some help and be somebody to talk to. So, with all that, Fred, I will quit talking. I'll put my contact information up there again, and we can try to answer some questions. I don't know if I missed any in the chat box. I'll kind of go back. No, it doesn't look like.
Nope. Thank you, Tim. I believe we're caught up on the chat box. I'd like to encourage, if folks want to type it in, give us a question that they're thinking. Otherwise, just unmute and we'll go ahead and just have the discussion right here. Remind everybody the program has been recorded and will be archived on the ISU Dairy Team webpage. Give me 5 or 6 days to get it up. Um, I will send an email announcement when it is available. Uh, I put it on a couple times. There's a short evaluation in the chat box, and it helps us make improvements to upcoming programs. It is short, and your response will be greatly appreciated. Uh, Tim, if you want to go ahead and uh, discontinue your sharing, I will go ahead and share a screen, and
Oh,
that's,
you want me to?
yeah, go ahead and
Oh,
quit sharing.
want me to get out of there? Sorry. No,
There,
now I'm listening. So, yeah, and like
okay.
I said, that was really a taste of what we do, and really encourage people to reach out and try to join one of those um, in-person meetings. We'd love to see you in Rock Rapids if that works for you. I know Fred and I already have some plans of maybe some more of those after the first of the year if everything goes well. Uh, but yeah, I it's a 6 hour program where we get a lot more in depth. I tried to just touch the tip of the iceberg on today's program. So.
And I've got the flyer on the screen now for the program there in Lyon County. All the contact information is there. If you're a computer or tech kind of person, the QR code is live and you can just click on that and it takes you right to the registration part of things. Uh, what I How early is too early to start this is one of the questions. And I'm asking it because I especially want to talk about the management transfer. I think about when my uncle died, he knew where everything was and his kids and the cousins. It took a couple of years before we had everything figured out. How early do you start this?
You know, I don't want to give you the cliche answer and say it's never too early, but really, as our children start getting to the age where they can start handling making some of those decisions and thinking some of those things, it really is. It really can't be too early. You want a smooth. If something happens to you, you want a smooth transition. Um, yeah, I always tell the story of my great grandpa when he passed away. We were helping moving him out of the house, and I got tasked with cleaning out his dresser. I pulled out his sock drawer, dumped it into a bag, and I heard a clink. Found a set of safety deposit keys. Nobody knew about it. We went to the safety deposit box and found another life insurance policy that he had that nobody knew about. And I almost shipped that set of keys off to the Goodwill with everything else, right? So, um, if you have those secrets and you don't get them told, and I don't like to be the guy telling you that trying to slap you with reality, but none of us are promised tomorrow. If something happens to you tomorrow, could the farm continue? And I hope your answer is yes. And so helping people understand how to make those decisions and how the business operates. They don't have to You don't have to listen to their input on the decisions, but at least let them know how you make those decisions.
Very good. We've talked almost exclusively on transferring in the family. What's the difference if we've got someone in our circle that's going to get some of this who's non-family heir? What do we think about differently?
You know, the tools and the process is a lot the same. Um, it's sometimes turns out being easier when we do non-family members because we can take a lot of the emotion out of it, right? But uh, yeah, the tools that we would use and the process we'd go through would be a lot the same that we would uh, with family. Um, just how we make that process work, it all comes back to those goals and what you're trying to do and what the timeline is and what the best tools to do that are.
Very good. We've talked, or you've talked a lot about having the meeting,
Yeah.
and at some point, when do we introduce the other important people who help keep the farm together in this process? The banker, the tax man, the farm manager. Is there a point where you're putting this together where you got to get a bigger kitchen table because there's more people going to be there?
Yeah, I think once you get the basic structure of what you want to do and those goals laid out, involving those other people, the bankers, the accountants, those people, and it's why I like that thing so much. It goes back to my canoe, my cartoon at the beginning. You don't want somebody in your canoe pointing backwards, so you need to figure out who all is in your canoe and who all you want in your canoe, and make sure they're all pointing the right direction. And once you get those goals set, your banker, your accountant, your life insurance or your insurance salesman, they may have tools and thoughts and things that are going to help you along the way. So the sooner you involve them in that plan, the better your plan's probably going to be.
Very good. Are there questions coming from the audience? Just go ahead and unmute and ask your question. Karen, I see you unmuted. What's your question?
Oh, I don't have a question. I'm so sorry. I unmuted because you said something about it earlier, and I don't have one right now. Sorry.
Okay, fair enough.
I,
We,
I might have scared him, Fred.
I tell you, somebody you won't scare, I'll guarantee, is Carly. Carly, what do you want to tell us a little bit about the program coming up on the 11th and 18th, especially for those who aren't familiar with the area? Where is the Frontier Bank? Okay, maybe she stepped away. We do have a question that came in from Colin. If a family makes a plan today with the older generation in their 50s, kids in college, how do you navigate changing plans over the next 20 to 30 years before estates come up?
That's a great question, and that's something I pulled out of the program. Once we get this plan built, I think it's really important. I tell people just to set a reminder on their phone for one day a year, whether it's after Christmas or Thanksgiving or Easter, whatever your birthday, whatever day works for you. Once a year, at least once a year, pull that plan out, look at it, see what changes have happened in your family. These are not set in stone a lot of times. These are living, breathing documents. There's things that happen in a family, whether it's deaths, divorces, marriages, children. Um, Lots of things can happen over time. And if we aren't continually reviewing that, maybe some things can get left behind that we don't intend to. So, yeah, we need a plan, but it's a living, breathing document that we need to continue to monitor over time.
Very good. If you go and look into the chat box, you'll see that Anne has put a couple of websites up, lots of good information there. Okay, we've got about 2 minutes, but I'm not afraid to give back some time if we don't have any questions. Again, thank you, Tim. Appreciate the time and the incredibly good information you've shared with us. Any last minute takeaway message you want folks to think about before they come to the live program?
Yeah, just remember you're not alone. Every farm family in America is probably going through this too, or some version of this. Whatever issues you're having, or you're not alone, other people are having it. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. Iowa State has lots of great resources. There's lots of other people out there with resources. Um, just get something done. Don't stress about it. You're not alone, and just keep moving forward. I always tell people, what can you do today to move the ball forward, and concentrate on that.
Very good. Well, Tim, thank you again. And with that, I'm going to shut the program down. Thank everybody for joining us. And if you have questions, every county has an extension office. give them a call and they'll be able to get a hold of the right people who can answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.